High pressure holds until Thursday.
Expect clear skies and imagery shows a significant thermal event.
Hey everyone. Before we get into this one, if you're interested in real stories from people who work in remote, isolated locations where strange things happen, you need to subscribe. Hit that like button if you want more content from Forest Service workers. And seriously, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is. I love hearing from you guys. Now, what I'm about to share happened during my first season as a fire lookout in Montana, and it's the reason there are protocols in our training manual that officially don't exist. Let's get into it. My name is Emma Reeves, and I spent last summer as a fire lookout in the Flathead National Forest, Montana. If you've never heard of this job, it's exactly what it sounds like. You live alone in a tower on top of a mountain for months at a time, watching for forest fires. No running water, no electricity beyond solar panels, no internet. Just you, a radio, binoculars, and a 360-degree view of wilderness. Most people can't handle it. The isolation drives them crazy within weeks. But I loved it. After 4 years working tech support in Seattle, dealing with entitled customers and fluorescent lights and the constant noise of the city, the idea of a complete solitude in the mountains sounded like paradise. The Forest Service assigned me to Tower 12, elevation 7,200 feet, in the Cabinet Mountains. The tower itself was built in 1952, a 14 by 14-foot cabin on a 40-foot metal tower, accessible only by a narrow trail that took 3 hours to hike. No cell service. No visitors. Just me and the wilderness. During my training at the ranger station in Libby, the district ranger, a grizzled man named Tom Hendricks who'd been with the Forest Service for 30 years, gave me the standard briefing. How to use the Osborne Firefinder to pinpoint smoke locations. How to maintain the logbook. How to survive lightning storms when you're the tallest thing for miles. Then he pulled out a laminated map marked Confidential Lookout Network. This is every active and inactive tower in your district, he said, pointing to various marked positions. Tower 9, Tower 10, Tower 11. Those are your neighbors. You'll check in with them twice daily on the radio. Standard procedure. I counted 12 towers on the map. What about Tower 7? I don't see it here. Tom's expression changed, something between uncomfortable and resigned. Tower 7 is no longer in service. You don't need to worry about it. But it's still standing, right? I saw it on the old Forest Service maps from the 1960s. Yes, it's still standing. But it's not part of the active network. You're forbidden from contacting it, especially after midnight. That's a direct order. Why after midnight specifically? Tom didn't answer for a long moment. Then he pulled out a faded document from his desk drawer. It looked like a memo from 1983, yellowed with age, with coffee stains and handwritten notes in the margins. Operational Directive 7-83. All lookout personnel are prohibited from responding to transmissions originating from Tower 7 between the hours of midnight and 5 a.m. Any violations will result in immediate termination and psychological evaluation. What kind of transmissions? I asked. Weather reports, Tom said quietly. Every night, someone broadcasts weather reports from Tower 7. Has been since 1983. Standard format, professional delivery. Except the reports are never for the current day. They're always 3 days in the future. I laughed. That's ridiculous. Someone's pranking the radio channel. That's what we thought initially. Then the reports started coming true. Every single one. Temperature, precipitation, wind speed, cloud cover. Accurate to the degree. The broadcast predicted a lightning storm on August 15, 1983. 3 days later, on August 15th, that exact storm hit. Started the biggest forest fire in Montana history. Killed 3 firefighters. So, someone's predicting the weather. That's not. The man broadcasting from Tower 7 is James Kavanaugh. He was the lookout stationed there in 1983. He died in that lightning storm. His body was found in the tower, struck by lightning while trying to radio for help during the fire he'd predicted 3 days earlier. The room suddenly felt colder. You're saying a dead man has been broadcasting weather reports for 40 years. I'm saying we don't contact Tower 7 after midnight. We don't respond to its transmissions. We don't investigate. We just acknowledge that it exists and stay away. That's the rule. Violation means termination. No exceptions. Understand? I nodded, even though I didn't understand at all. I arrived at Tower 12 on June 1st. The hike up was brutal. 3 hours of steep switchbacks with 60 pounds of supplies on my back. But when I finally climbed the ladder and entered the cabin, the view made every aching muscle worth it. Mountains stretched in every direction. Endless forest. Lakes glittering in valleys. The world spread out below like a map, beautiful and untouched. This was going to be my home for the next 4 months. The cabin was sparse but functional. A bed, a desk, with the Osborne fire finder. A circular map with crosshairs for locating smoke. Shelves with logbooks dating back to 1952. A propane stove, and the radio, an old Motorola unit from the 1970s, surprisingly well maintained. I spent my first day settling in, organizing supplies, familiarizing myself with the landscape. At 8 a.m. and 6 p.m., I checked in with the other towers as instructed. Tower 12 to Tower 11, morning check-in. How copy? Tower 11 reads you loud and clear. Welcome to the mountains, Emma. You're going to love it up here. Tower 11 was manned by a guy named Mike, 60-something, on his 20th season. Tower 9 was operated by Elizabeth, mid-30s, former wildland firefighter. Tower 10 was empty this year. Budget cuts. We chatted casually during check-ins. Compared weather conditions, reported any smoke we saw. It was comforting, knowing there were other people out there in the wilderness, even if they were 20 miles away. That first night, I stayed up late watching the stars. No light pollution this far from civilization. The Milky Way was a bright river across the sky. I'd never seen anything so beautiful. At 11:45 p.m., I was about to sleep when the radio crackled to life. This is Tower 7, broadcasting weather report for June 4th. High temperature, 83 degrees Fahrenheit. Low, 57. Partly cloudy with afternoon thunderstorms developing at approximately 3 p.m. Lightning strikes concentrated in grid sectors E4 and F5. Wind from the southwest at 12 miles per hour, gusting to 25. Humidity, 42%. Conditions favorable for fire ignition in dry lightning scenarios. End transmission. The voice was male, calm, professional, exactly like a weather forecast. But it was June 1st. He was forecasting June 4th, 3 days from now. I grabbed my logbook and wrote down the transmission details. The voice had said Tower 7, the Forbidden Tower, the one I wasn't supposed to contact after midnight. Against my better judgment, I picked up the radio. Tower 7, this is Tower 12. Please identify. Who is this? Static, then Tower 12, you are in violation of Operational Directive 7-83. Do not respond to Tower 7 transmissions. Acknowledge. It wasn't the same voice. This was Tom Hendricks, my supervisor. He'd been monitoring the channel. Acknowledged, I said. I didn't realize the directive is clear. No contact after midnight, ever. Is that understood? Yes, sir. Good. Get some sleep. We'll discuss this tomorrow. I lay awake for hours, staring at the ceiling. A dead man broadcasting weather reports. A tower that still operated 40 years after its lookout died. And a supervisor who monitored the radio at midnight to make sure no one broke the rules. What the hell had I gotten myself into? The next morning, Tom radioed me directly on a private channel. Emma, about last night. I should have emphasized the midnight rule more clearly during training. Tower 7's transmissions are a known phenomenon. We don't understand them. We don't investigate them. We just accept that they happen and move on. But if the forecasts are accurate, they are accurate. 100% accurate. Which is why we log them. Each tower keeps a record of Tower 7's broadcasts. If a significant weather event is predicted, like those lightning storms he mentioned, we pre-position firefighting resources. We use the information. We just don't acknowledge its source. That doesn't make sense. If we're using the forecasts, why can't we respond? Why can't we investigate? Because everyone who's tried has disappeared or gone insane. In 1985, a lookout named Patricia Morris tried to hike to Tower 7 after hearing the broadcasts. She was found 3 days later, wandering in the forest, completely catatonic. She spent the rest of her life in a psychiatric facility, never speaking again. In 1992, another lookout tried to trace the radio signal. His equipment malfunctioned, and he fell from his tower while trying to fix the antenna. Broke his back. Paralyzed from the waist down. Jesus. Tower 7 wants to be heard. It doesn't want to be found. We respect that boundary. We listen to its forecasts, we log them, and we stay away. That's how this works. Understand? Understood. But I didn't understand. Not really. Because if a dead man was somehow broadcasting accurate weather forecasts, that meant something impossible was happening. And impossible things have explanations. They have to. Over the next few days, I fell into a routine. Wake at sunrise. Morning, check in with the other towers. Scan the horizon for smoke. Read, write, watch the weather. Evening, check in. Watch the sunset. Sleep. And every night at 11:45 p.m., Tower 7 broadcast its weather report. This is Tower 7, broadcasting weather report for June 5th. This is Tower 7, broadcasting weather report for June 6th. Each broadcast was exactly the same format. Temperature highs and lows, cloud cover, wind, humidity. Lightning strike locations if thunderstorms were forecast. The voice never varied. Calm, professional, matter of fact. And every single forecast came true. On June 4th, just as Tower 7 had predicted on June 1st, thunderstorms developed at 3 p.m. in grid sectors E4 and F5. The lightning strikes occurred exactly where predicted. I watched through binoculars as the storms rolled through, counting the strikes, comparing them to the forecast. Perfect accuracy. It was impossible, but it was happening. On June 10th, something changed. The usual broadcast came at 11:45 p.m. Weather report for June 13th. Standard format. But then, after the end transmission phrase, there was a pause, and another voice came through. Tower 12, Emma Reeves, 27 years old, former tech support. First season as lookout. You're wondering about me, about how this works, about why you're forbidden to make contact. My blood ran cold. The voice knew my name, knew my background, was speaking directly to me. Don't respond, the voice continued. I know you want to, but responding creates a connection, and connections have consequences. I'm trying to help you avoid those consequences, but you need to understand something. The forecasts I give you, They're not predictions, they're warnings. The weather I describe hasn't happened yet, and if you act on the information correctly, it never will. But if you ignore it, if you fail to prepare, then the forecast becomes reality. Do you understand? The timeline branches at the moment of my broadcast. Your actions determine which branch becomes real. The radio went silent. I sat there, shaking, trying to process what I'd heard. The forecasts weren't predictions of an inevitable future. They were warnings of a possible future. And somehow, by acting on those warnings, by prepositioning firefighting resources, by preparing for storms, we were preventing the worst outcomes. But how could a dead man be doing this? How could he see possible futures? How could he broadcast from a tower that should be silent? The next morning, I violated protocol. I pulled out the old Forest Service maps and located Tower 7. It was 12 miles northwest of my position, accessible by an old logging road that had been decommissioned in the 1980s. I could hike there in 5 or 6 hours. I shouldn't do it. Tom had been clear. Everyone who tried to reach Tower 7 ended up dead, injured, or insane. But I needed to know, needed to understand. I packed supplies for a day hike: water, food, first aid kit, GPS, satellite phone, even though it probably wouldn't work this far into the wilderness. I left a note in my cabin explaining where I was going in case I didn't come back. The hike started easily enough. The old logging road was overgrown but still passable. But about 2 hours in, things got weird. The forest became too quiet. No birds, no insects, no wind. Just oppressive silence that pressed against my ears. The trees looked wrong, not unhealthy, just wrong. Growing at angles that didn't make sense, twisted in ways that hurt to look at. And I kept seeing movement in my peripheral vision. Shadows that disappeared when I turned to look. Shapes between the trees that might have been animals, or might have been something else. My GPS started malfunctioning. The coordinates kept changing even though I was moving in a straight line. The display would flicker, show impossible locations, then correct itself. I should have turned back. Every instinct screamed at me to turn back. But I could see it now, through the trees ahead. Tower 7. It looked exactly like Tower 12, a metal tower supporting a small cabin. But something about it was off. The metal was too clean, too new, like it had been built yesterday instead of 70 years ago. I approached slowly. The ladder leading up to the cabin was intact, not a spot of rust. At the base of the tower, there was a sign. Weathered wood, hand-carved letters. Tower 7, James Kavanaugh, Lookout 1983 season, do not climb after midnight. I looked at my watch. 2:47 p.m. Still daylight. Still safe. I started climbing. The ladder rungs were ice cold despite the warm afternoon. My breath came out in visible clouds even though it was 70 degrees. With each rung I climbed, the temperature dropped. Halfway up, I heard the radio, coming from inside the cabin above me. A voice broadcasting. This is Tower 7, broadcasting weather report for June 14th. High temperature 91 degrees, low 62. Clear skies with increasing winds. Red flag fire warning conditions in effect. Lightning strikes 0. Wind from the west at 30 miles per hour, gusting to 55. Humidity 18%. Extreme fire danger. Immediate evacuation recommended for grid sectors C2 through E4. June 14th. That was tomorrow. And he was predicting extreme fire danger. Evacuation level conditions. I reached the top of the ladder. The cabin door was open. Inside, sitting at the radio console, was a man. He wore a Forest Service uniform from the 1980s. His back was to me, and he was still broadcasting. End transmission. Tower 7 offline until next scheduled broadcast. He turned around. James Kavanaugh looked exactly like his photograph from the historical records. Mid-40s, weathered face, calm eyes. Except he was translucent. Not quite ghost, not quite solid. Like he was projected from somewhere else, overlaid onto reality. "You climbed the tower," he said. His voice was sad, resigned. "Despite the warnings, despite the directive. You just had to know." "What are you?" I whispered. "I'm what happens when someone dies trying to do their job. When they die with unfinished work. When their last thought is, I have to warn them. The lightning struck me while I was radioing about the storm. I died mid-transmission, and I've been transmitting ever since, trying to warn people, trying to prevent the deaths I couldn't prevent in life." "But you're predicting the future. That's impossible." "I'm not predicting anything. I'm experiencing it. Time works differently for me now. I exist in all moments simultaneously. Past, present, future. They're all happening at once. I can see the fires that haven't started yet, the storms that haven't formed, the deaths that haven't occurred, and I broadcast warnings, hoping someone listens. But Tom said your forecasts always come true. They come true when people don't listen, when they ignore the warnings, when they fail to prepare. But when they act on the information, when they pre-position resources, when they evacuate at-risk areas, the timeline shifts. The worst outcomes are prevented. That's why I broadcast. That's why I'm still here. Because every warning I give has the potential to save lives." He stood up and walked toward me, through me, like I was the ghost, not him. "But you shouldn't have come here, Emma. You shouldn't have climbed the tower, because now you're connected. Now you can see what I see. And once you start seeing possible futures, you can't unsee them. The weight of all those preventable deaths, it's crushing. It's why Patricia Morris went catatonic. It's why others went insane. The human mind isn't meant to perceive time the way I do. I felt it then, a splitting sensation in my head, like reality was fracturing, and through the cracks I could see fires, hundreds of fires, burning across timelines, some prevented, some not. People dying, people living, futures branching and collapsing and branching again, all of it happening simultaneously, overlapping, crushing together into a weight I couldn't support. I stumbled backward toward the ladder. Kavanaugh's voice followed me. "Go back to your tower, Emma. Forget you saw me. Forget you climbed this ladder. And whatever you do, don't come back after midnight. During the day, I can maintain some control. Keep the timelines separate. But after midnight, when I broadcast, the boundaries weaken. If you're here after midnight, you'll see everything, and it will break you." I climbed down the ladder so fast I nearly fell. Ran back through the forest, GPS malfunctioning, trees twisted, shadows moving. Behind me, I could hear Tower 7's radio crackling to life again, even though it was only 3 p.m. "This is Tower 7, emergency broadcast. Fire ignition in grid sector D3. Time of ignition, 4:17 p.m., June 13th. Cause, lightning strike from storm currently forming. Evacuation required immediately." That was happening right now. I looked to the west. Storm clouds were forming, and beneath them I could see it starting, a thin column of smoke rising from the forest. I ran. The smoke was already visible, a thin gray column rising from the forest exactly where Kavanaugh had warned. Grid sector D3. I checked my watch, 4:19 p.m., 2 minutes after his predicted ignition time. My satellite phone had no signal this deep in the forest, but I had my handheld radio. I pulled it out while running. Tower 12 to base, emergency traffic. Fire spotted in grid sector D3. Single column, estimated less than 5 minutes old. Requesting immediate dispatch. Tom's voice came back instantly. Tower 12, we copy. How did you know about D3? Tower 7 hasn't broadcast tonight yet. I hesitated. If I told him I'd climbed Tower 7, I'd be terminated immediately. But people's lives might depend on early warning. I saw the smoke from the trail. I was hiking. What trail? Tower 12 doesn't have adjacent trails in that direction. Shit, I'd been caught. Emma, where are you right now, exactly? I'm returning from Tower 7. Silence on the radio, then, get back to your tower. Immediately. We'll discuss your termination later. Right now, we need you operational for the fire response. I made it back to Tower 12 as the sun was setting. The smoke from D3 had grown into a full column. The fire was spreading. I could hear helicopters in the distance. The Forest Service was mobilizing. Through my binoculars, I watched the fire's progression. It was moving exactly as Kavanaugh had described in his earlier broadcast, the one about June 14th conditions. High winds pushing it northeast, low humidity making it aggressive. The firefighters were positioning themselves based on standard protocols, but I knew something they didn't. I'd heard Kavanaugh's emergency broadcast, the one that came after I'd climbed the tower, and it had been different from his usual forecasts, more urgent, more specific. At 8 p.m., during the evening check-in, Tom radioed me directly. Emma, I need you to tell me exactly what happened at Tower 7. Everything. So I did. The hike, the impossible temperature drop, Kavanaugh's translucent form, his explanation about existing in all moments simultaneously, the way reality had fractured when he talked about seeing possible futures. Tom was quiet for a long time. Then, Jesus Christ, you actually saw him, talked to him. In 40 years, no one's managed that and stayed sane. Patricia Morris saw him and never spoke again. Others saw something else, something that drove them mad. But you saw Kavanaugh himself. He said, I'm connected now, that I can see what he sees. Can you? Are you experiencing anything unusual? I looked out at the darkening forest. And yes, I was seeing things. Overlays, transparent images superimposed on reality. I saw the fire as it was now, but I also saw it as it would be in 2 hours, and 4 hours, and tomorrow. Multiple timelines branching, some with the fire contained, some with it spreading to consume thousands of acres. I can see possibilities, I said quietly. Multiple versions of what might happen. It's like looking at a tree and seeing all its branches at once. That's what Kavanaugh experiences. What killed him was trying to prevent every bad outcome. He broadcast warnings, tried to change timelines, kept pushing himself to see further and further ahead. The lightning strike that killed him, he knew it was coming, could see it days in advance, but he stayed at his post anyway, trying to warn people about the resulting fire. That dedication, that refusal to abandon his duty even when he knew it would kill him, that's what trapped him between moments. So what do I do? How do I stop seeing this? I don't know. No one who's experienced it has ever recovered. But maybe you can use it. If you can see the timeline branches, you can help us make decisions that prevent the worst outcomes. Just like Kavanaugh does, but consciously. Deliberately. That's insane. I'm not qualified. You're the only person in 40 years who's talked to Kavanaugh and retained their sanity. That makes you qualified. Now tell me, what do you see happening with the D3 fire? What are the possible outcomes? I looked through my binoculars at the fire, but I also looked at the overlays, the possible futures. If the firefighters continue their current approach, there's a 60% chance they contain it by morning. But there's a 40% chance the wind shifts at 11 p.m. and drives the fire toward the town of Lincoln. Evacuations would be necessary. 3 homes burn. No fatalities if the evacuation is ordered in time. Can you see what causes the wind shift? I focused harder on the overlays, trying to understand the mechanics of how one timeline branched into another. There's a cold front approaching from the north. In most timelines it arrives after midnight, but in the bad timelines it arrives 3 hours early. The interaction with the fire's convection column creates the wind shift. Is there any way to know which timeline we're in? I'd need to monitor the temperature and pressure readings. If the cold front is moving faster than expected, I'll see it in the data. Tom was quiet, processing. Okay, here's what we're going to do. You're going to monitor that fire through the night. You're going to watch the timeline branches, and if you see us heading toward a bad outcome, you're going to warn me immediately. Understand? What about my termination? For climbing Tower 7? That's suspended indefinitely. Right now, you're our most valuable asset. We'll deal with disciplinary action after fire season ends. The night was long. I watched the fire through binoculars, but more importantly, I watched the overlays, the possible futures. Around 10 p.m., I noticed something in the temperature data. The cold front was moving faster than forecast. We were heading toward the bad timeline. Tom, the wind shift is coming. Cold front arrived early. You need to order evacuations for Lincoln, now. How sure are you? 90%. The timeline is collapsing toward the bad outcome. Evacuate now or people die. Tom didn't hesitate. All units, this is command. Evacuate Lincoln immediately. Expect wind shift in approximately 1 hour. Reposition resources to protect structures. I watched through the overlays as the timeline shifted. The evacuation order changed the future. The branch where homes burned and people were at risk began to fade. A new branch emerged, one where everyone got out safely, where firefighters were positioned correctly, where the wind shift caused property damage but no casualties. By midnight, the evacuation was complete. At 11:17 p.m., exactly when I'd predicted, the wind shifted. The fire roared toward Lincoln, but it found empty houses and prepared firefighters instead of trapped residents. By 3 a.m., the fire was contained. 0 casualties. 3 structures damaged but no total losses. A good outcome pulled from what could have been tragedy. And at 11:45 p.m., right on schedule, Tower 7 had broadcast its weather report. This is Tower 7, broadcasting weather report for June 16th. But this time, when I heard Kavanaugh's voice, I understood it differently. He wasn't predicting an inevitable future. He was showing me the bad timeline, the one where people didn't prepare, didn't evacuate, didn't act. The warning timeline. And by showing us the worst case, he gave us the information we needed to create the better case. Over the next weeks, I settled into my new role. I was still a fire lookout, but now I was also something else. A timeline monitor, a probability watcher, someone who could see the branches and help the Forest Service make decisions that kept us on the good paths. It was exhausting. The overlays never stopped. Every time I looked at anything, I saw all its possible futures. A tree could fall or stand, a hiker could get lost or find their way. A fire could spread or be contained. The weight of all those possibilities pressed down on me constantly. I understood now why Patricia Morris had gone catatonic, why others had broken under the strain. Seeing every possible future meant carrying the responsibility for every preventable death. But I wasn't alone anymore. Every night at 11:45 p.m., Kavanaugh broadcast his weather reports. And after the official transmission ended, he'd speak to me directly, teaching me how to manage the visions, how to filter out the noise and focus on the relevant branches, how to identify the decision points where timelines diverged. The key is not trying to see everything, he said one night. Focus on high-probability catastrophic events. Let the minor branches blur. Save your energy for the moments that matter. How do you decide what matters? I asked. Even though I wasn't supposed to respond to Tower 7 transmissions, Tom had given me special authorization to maintain contact with Kavanaugh. He was training me in abilities no one else understood. Lives. Always prioritize lives. Property can be rebuilt. Forests regenerate. But a human death, that's a branch permanently closed. That's a future that can never be. So, watch for the timelines where people die and work to prevent those outcomes. What about you? You died. You chose to stay at your post, even knowing the lightning would kill you. Why? Because I could see the alternative. If I'd abandoned my tower, if I'd sought shelter, the fire would have spread undetected for 30 minutes longer. By the time someone else spotted it, 3 firefighters would have been trapped. They'd have died in the blaze. So I stayed, I radioed the warning, I saved them, and the lightning struck me before I could finish the transmission. And you've been trapped here ever since. Trapped is the wrong word. Bound, obligated. I'm not ready to move on because the work isn't finished. Every night I see the fires that haven't started yet, the storms that haven't formed. And I broadcast warnings, hoping someone listens. That's my purpose now. That's what keeps me here. Will I end up like you? Bound to this place after I die? Kavanaugh was quiet for a moment. That depends on your choices. I stayed because I chose duty over survival. If you make the same choice, if you prioritize the work over your own life, then yes, you might become like me. But you could also choose differently. You could leave, walk away, let someone else carry this burden. Could you? If you had it to do over, would you leave the tower? Would you save yourself? No, I'd make the same choice, because those 3 firefighters lived. They had families, they had futures, and their children exist because I stayed at my post. That's worth dying for. That's worth being bound to a tower for 40 years. The math is simple. 1 life for 3 is always the right equation. I understood, and I knew, with terrible certainty, that I'd make the same choice he had. That when the moment came, and it would come, I'd prioritize others over myself. That's who I was. That's who Kavanaugh was. And that's why we could perceive timelines when others couldn't. The burden chose us because it knew we'd carry it. July brought the heat, temperatures in the 90s, humidity dropping into the teens, red flag warnings almost daily. The forest was a tinderbox waiting for a spark, and the timelines showed it. Every day, I watched multiple fire ignitions across the district. Most were prevented. Lightning rods worked. Prescribed burns cleared fuel. People followed fire restrictions. But some slipped through. Small fires that grew big. Contained fires that escaped. Futures branching into catastrophe. On July 15th, I saw something that terrified me. A massive fire. Bigger than anything I'd witnessed in the overlays before. Starting in grid sector G7 and spreading across 4 grid sectors in 12 hours. Hundreds of acres. Towns threatened. Firefighters deployed. And in one branch, one very probable branch, 8 firefighters died. I radioed Tom immediately. We have a potential catastrophic event. July 18th, grid sector G7, lightning strike at 2:33 p.m. If conditions are right, it becomes a mega fire. Multiple fatalities. How probable? 45%. That's high for a worst-case scenario, and I can see the decision points where it tips from manageable to catastrophic. We need to pre-position resources. We need to have crews ready the moment that strike happens. Emma, we can't mobilize major resources based on a maybe. The budget doesn't allow for it. We'd need to be sure. I am sure. This is what Kavanaugh's been warning about. This is the big one for the season. Tom sighed. Let me make some calls. If I can get authorization, we'll stage additional crews, but I need you monitoring that timeline constantly. The moment you see the probability shift, I need to know. Over the next 3 days, I barely slept. I watched the G7 sector constantly, monitoring the timeline branches. The weather was cooperating. Hot, dry, unstable. Perfect conditions for fire. July 18th dawned clear and windy. Red flag warnings were in effect across the entire district. And at 2:31 p.m., 2 minutes earlier than I'd predicted, lightning struck in G7. Tom, it's happening. Strike in G7. Fire started. Copy. We're deploying crews now. Stay on the overlays. Tell me which direction it's going to run. I focused on the fire's future. Multiple branches. In some, it was contained quickly. In others, it grew. And in the worst branch, the one I desperately wanted to avoid, it created its own weather system, generated fire tornadoes, trapped 8 firefighters in a canyon. It wants to run northeast. Wind is pushing it that way. But there's a canyon at the edge of F7. If the fire reaches that canyon, it'll trap anyone inside. You need to keep crews out of that canyon, no matter what. Emma, that canyon is the best access point. We need to cut a fire break there to stop the spread. Trust me. Do not put crews in that canyon. Find another approach. That canyon is a death trap in the bad timeline. Tom hesitated. I could hear him weighing the tactical situation against my warning. Okay, we'll find an alternate approach, but this better be right. I watched the overlays. The fire grew. Crews fought it from multiple angles. And slowly, painfully, the bad timeline began to fade. The probability of the canyon trap decreased from 45% to 30% to 15%. By midnight, it was down to 5%. We'd nearly avoided the worst case. Then I heard it. A transmission on the emergency channel. Air tanker down. Air tanker down in sector F8. Crew needs immediate extraction. My blood went cold. I focused on F8 in the overlays. An air tanker, a plane carrying fire retardant, had crashed. The pilot was alive but trapped in the wreckage. And the fire was spreading toward him. In the overlays, I saw 2 branches. In one, rescue crews reached him in time. In the other, the fire overtook his position before extraction was possible. Tom, the pilot, you need to get him out now. Fire reaches his position in 40 minutes if wind doesn't change. 30 minutes if it does. We're trying, but the terrain is too rough for vehicles. We're sending a helicopter. I watched the timelines collapse. The helicopter approach was too slow. In 90% of the branches, the pilot died. There had to be another way. What about ground crews? Can anyone reach him on foot? Negative. Too far through active fire. No one could make it. I looked at my tower, at the forest between me and F8. I could see the path in the overlays, the safe route through the fire, the narrow window where flames hadn't yet closed the corridor. And I saw the branches. In most timelines I didn't go, stayed safe in my tower. The pilot died. But in one timeline, one low probability timeline, I went, reached him, guided rescue crews to our position. Both of us survived. It was a stupid risk. Insane. But Kavanaugh's voice echoed in my mind. 1 life for 3 is always the right equation. 1 life for 1 was still the right equation. I'm going, I said. What? Emma, no. Stay in your tower. I can see the safe route. I can reach him in time. I'm going. I grabbed my pack, radio, first aid kit, fire shelter, and I started running. The forest was chaos. Smoke, flames, falling trees. But I could see the overlays, could see which paths were safe and which led to death. I followed the safe branch, trusting the visions. 20 minutes into my run, I heard Kavanaugh's voice on my radio. Not a weather report. Something else. Emma, stop. You're heading toward the bad timeline. The one where you die. I can save him. I can see the path. You're seeing the path as it is now. But timelines shift. The wind is about to change. When it does, the safe corridor closes. You'll be trapped. What if I move faster? You won't make it. I can see all the branches. In every timeline where you continue, you die. Please, turn back. I stopped running, looked at the overlays. He was right. The safe path was collapsing. The wind shift was coming. If I continued, I'd be cut off. But the pilot would also die, unless someone reached him. What if someone else goes? What if I guide them? There's no time. The only person close enough is you, and you can't make it. I stood there in the burning forest watching futures branch and collapse, watching the pilot die in every timeline, watching myself die in timelines where I tried to save him. This was the moment Kavanaugh had faced. The decision between duty and survival. The choice that had bound him to his tower for 40 years. I have to try, I said. Emma, please. I turned off my radio and ran. The corridor was closing. Flames on both sides, smoke choking. I pulled my shirt over my face and pushed through. The overlays showed me the pilot's location. 200 yards. 150. 100. The wind shifted. Flames roared across my path. I deployed my fire shelter, a reflective tent designed to protect firefighters from radiant heat. Crawled inside. Felt the inferno pass over me. When it cleared, I emerged. The path behind me was gone, completely consumed. I was cut off, trapped in a pocket of unburned forest with flames on all sides. But ahead, I could see the crash site. The pilot was there, still alive, waving at me. I reached him. Are you injured? Legs broken. Can't walk. Who the hell are you? Fire lookout from Tower 12. We're getting you out of here. I radioed my position. Told them I'd reached the pilot but was trapped. Helicopter extraction was impossible. Too much smoke. Ground crews couldn't reach us. We were surrounded. Deploy shelters, Tom said. Both of you. Wait for the fire to pass. It's your only chance. I looked at the overlays. In most timelines, deploying shelters worked. We survived. But in some branches, 20% probability, the fire was too intense. The shelters failed. We died. Better than the 100% probability of the pilot dying alone. We deployed our shelters and crawled inside as the fire engulfed our position. The heat was unbearable. The shelter's fabric glowed from radiant energy. I could hear the pilot screaming through his shelter, and I could see the overlays, could see which timelines we survived and which we didn't. Could see the branches collapsing as the fire intensified. 10% probability of survival. 5%, 3%, then I heard it. Through the roar of the flames, a voice on my radio. Kavanaugh. Emma, you made your choice. You chose duty over survival, just like I did. So now I'll make mine. I'm changing the timeline. I'm pushing the wind, creating a gap in the flames. When I tell you, run north, exactly north. Don't deviate. Don't look back. Just run. You can affect the physical world? I can when I'm willing to pay the price. when I'm willing to use all my energy, all my presence, everything that's kept me bound to this place. I can change one thing, push one timeline, save 2 lives, but it will burn me out, scatter me. I won't be able to broadcast anymore, won't be able to warn people. This is my last intervention. Don't. The district needs your warnings. People need. The district has you now. You can see what I see. You can warn what I would have warned. And unlike me, you're alive. You can act. You're more valuable than I am. So I'm spending myself to save you. To save both of you. Consider it my final forecast. My last warning. Live well, Emma. Make the broadcasts I can no longer make. The wind changed, impossibly, against all meteorological logic. A gap opened in the flames. Now! Run north. I grabbed the pilot, pulled him out of his shelter. He screamed as his broken leg moved, but I dragged him north through the gap in the flames. Behind us, I heard Kavanaugh's voice one last time. This is Tower 7, final transmission. Fair skies ahead. End broadcast. We made it through, collapsed in a clearing. Helicopter picked us up 10 minutes later. The pilot survived. Broken leg, smoke inhalation, minor burns. But alive. I survived. Smoke inhalation, exhaustion, but alive. And Tower 7 went silent. That night, at 11:45 p.m., there was no broadcast. For the first time in 40 years, Tower 7 didn't transmit its weather report. Kavanaugh was gone. He'd spent everything he was to save us. Burned out his presence to push the timeline one final time. The district mourned him. Even though officially he died in 1983, everyone knew he'd been with us until now. Had been protecting us, warning us, keeping us safe. And now that duty fell to me. After Kavanaugh's sacrifice, everything changed. The overlays didn't go away. If anything, they became clearer, more detailed. I could see further into possible futures, understand the decision points more precisely. His final act, spending himself to save us, had somehow transferred his full ability to me. But with that ability came the weight of responsibility. The district needed weather forecasts. They'd relied on Kavanaugh's warnings for 40 years. Without them, they were blind to the bad timelines. They'd make decisions based on standard protocols instead of probability analysis. People would die in futures that could have been prevented. Someone needed to broadcast the warnings. Someone needed to become the new Tower 7. 3 days after the fire, Tom hiked up to Tower 12. It was the first time he'd visited my tower in person. He looked old, tired, worn down by decades of managing impossible situations. "How are you holding up?" he asked. "I can't stop seeing them. The futures, they never shut off. Every time I look at anything, I see all the ways it could go." That's what Kavanaugh experienced. The constant weight of knowing what could be prevented if only someone acted. How did he manage it for 40 years? Duty. Purpose. The knowledge that his broadcasts saved lives. That's what kept him going. That's what kept him bound to his tower even after death. Tom sat down heavily. "Emma, the district needs what Kavanaugh provided. We need someone who can see the bad timelines and warn us, someone who can help us make decisions that keep us on the good paths. You want me to take over his broadcasts. I want you to consider it. You're the only person alive who can see what he saw, who can provide the warnings we need. But I understand the cost. I understand what I'm asking you to become. A ghost, trapped in a tower, bound by duty. Not trapped, committed. There's a difference. Kavanaugh chose to stay at his post, chose to keep broadcasting even after death. You could make the same choice, but you'd make it while alive. You could leave after your season ends, could walk away. The difference is you'd have that option. He didn't. I looked out at the mountains, at the endless forest, at the future branches overlaying everything. If I do this, if I start broadcasting warnings, will I end up like him, unable to leave, bound here forever? I don't know. Maybe, but maybe you'll find a way to balance it, to provide the warnings without losing yourself. You're stronger than you think, Emma. You've survived things that broke others. You saved that pilot when every timeline said you'd die. You're already doing what Kavanaugh did. The broadcasts would just formalize it. What would I broadcast? Weather reports like he did? Weather, fire conditions, any high-probability catastrophic events you see in the timelines. Same format he used, same schedule. 11:45 p.m. every night. That way, people know when to listen, know when to expect the information. And if I see something really bad, something that requires immediate action, emergency broadcasts, anytime, same channel. We'll monitor it constantly. I thought about Kavanaugh's final words. Live well, Emma. Make the broadcasts I can no longer make. He'd given me his gift, his curse, his duty, and he'd trusted me to carry it forward. I'll do it, I said, but on one condition. At the end of fire season, I evaluate whether I can continue. If the weight becomes too much, if I start breaking like Patricia Morris, I need to be able to walk away. Agreed, you have my word. We'll monitor your mental health closely. Any signs you're deteriorating, we pull you out immediately. That night, at 11:45 p.m., I made my first broadcast. This is Tower 12, broadcasting weather report for July 22nd. High temperature 87 degrees Fahrenheit. Low 59. Partly cloudy with thunderstorms developing at approximately 4 p.m. Lightning strikes concentrated in grid sectors B2, C4, and E6. Wind from the southwest at 15 miles per hour. Humidity 38%. Moderate fire danger. 2 high probability ignitions. B2 at 4:17 p.m., 68% probability, and E6 at 5:03 p.m., 72% probability. Recommend pre-positioning crews at both locations. End transmission. I sat back, hands shaking. It felt wrong using my own voice, my own tower designation. Like I was pretending to be something I wasn't. But the radio crackled. Tom's voice. Tower 12, we copy your broadcast. Information received and logged. Resources will be positioned as recommended. Well done. Over the next weeks, I refined the broadcasts. Learned to balance detail with brevity. Learned to identify which timeline branches were worth warning about and which were low-probability noise. Learned to present the information in ways that allowed decision-makers to act without causing panic. And the system worked. On July 22nd, crews were positioned at B2 and E6 when the predicted lightning strikes occurred. Both fires were caught within minutes of ignition. Contained before they could spread. 0 acres burned. In the timeline where I hadn't broadcast, those fires grew to 50 acres each before being detected. 3 days of firefighting. Significant cost. In one branch, a firefighter was injured. But because I warned them, we stayed on the good timeline. The district started to trust my broadcasts the same way they'd trusted Kavanaugh's. Crews would adjust their positioning based on my warnings. Resources would be staged at predicted fire locations. Evacuations would be ordered when I saw bad timelines developing. I was saving lives, preventing disasters, making a difference. But the cost was real. I stopped sleeping more than 3 hours a night. The overlays were too intense during sleep. I'd dream in branching timelines, watching all possible futures simultaneously. It was exhausting. I stopped eating regularly. Food tasted like ash. Everything reminded me of fires that hadn't happened yet but could. and I stopped talking to anyone except Tom and the other lookouts during check-ins. Social interaction required energy I didn't have. Every conversation showed me future branches where relationships formed or failed, where words led to consequences I couldn't predict or control. I was becoming what Kavanaugh had been, isolated, consumed by duty, more connected to the timelines than to present reality. Mike from Tower 11 noticed first. During an evening check-in in August, he said, "Emma, you sound different. Distant. Are you okay up there?" "I'm fine. Just focused on the work." The work shouldn't consume you. Even Kavanaugh. Toward the end, people said he sounded hollow, like he'd given up everything except the duty. Don't let that happen to you. I'm managing it. Are you? When's the last time you took a day off? When's the last time you hiked down from your tower just to be somewhere different? I couldn't remember. The timeline monitoring was constant. If I left my tower, I might miss something. Might fail to warn about a critical event. People might die because I wasn't watching. "I'll take a break when fire season ends," I said. "Fire season ends in 6 weeks. You think you can maintain this pace for 6 more weeks?" I did. I had to. The district needed my broadcasts, needed someone to see the bad timelines and help them avoid catastrophe. But Mike was right to worry. By late August, I was having trouble distinguishing between timelines. Sometimes, I'd respond to events that hadn't happened yet. I'd radio warnings about fires that existed only in possible futures. Tom had to gently remind me to focus on high-probability events, not every potential branch. I was drowning in possibilities, losing myself in the infinite maze of what could be. On August 28th, I made a mistake. I saw a bad timeline. A catastrophic fire starting in grid sector A1. High winds, dry conditions, the fire growing to 50,000 acres. Multiple towns evacuated. Billions in damage. It was the worst-case scenario I'd seen all season. I broadcast an emergency warning. All units, catastrophic fire event predicted for August 30th, grid sector A1. Recommend immediate pre-positioning of all available resources. This is a code red maximum response situation. The district mobilized. Every crew, every piece of equipment, every helicopter and air tanker. Massive deployment based on my warning. August 30th came. The conditions were right, hot, dry, windy, everything aligned for disaster. But the fire didn't start. No lightning strikes in A1. No ignitions. Nothing. I'd seen a possible future, but it was a low-probability branch that I'd mistaken for high probability. I'd caused a massive mobilization for a fire that never happened. Tom was understanding, but firm when he radioed that evening. "Emma, that was a $1 million mistake. We deployed resources that were needed elsewhere. We pulled crews from other fires, all because you saw a timeline that didn't manifest. I'm sorry. I know what you thought, but you need to recalibrate. You need to distinguish between possible futures and probable futures. Kavanaugh never made that mistake. His forecasts were always accurate because he knew which timelines had enough weight to manifest. How did he know? How did he tell the difference? I don't know. Experience, maybe. Intuition. But you need to figure it out, because we can't afford another false alarm. The district is losing faith in the broadcasts. If people stop trusting your warnings, they'll stop acting on them. And then when a real catastrophe comes, no one will listen. He was right. I'd damaged the credibility of the broadcasts, proven that I wasn't Kavanaugh, that I couldn't reliably distinguish signal from noise. I needed help, but the only person who could teach me was gone. Or was he? That night, I hiked to Tower 7. It had been weeks since Kavanaugh's sacrifice. The tower stood silent, no longer broadcasting. but maybe some trace of him remained. Maybe I could learn from whatever he'd left behind. The climb was easier now. The temperature drop was less severe, the forest seemed more normal. Like Kavanaugh's presence had been what made the area strange, and without him, it was just another tower. I entered the cabin. It looked exactly as I'd seen it before. Radio console, Osborne firefinder, logbooks, but everything was covered in dust. No one had been here for weeks. I sat down at the radio, put my hand on the console where Kavanaugh had sat for decades, broadcasting his warnings. "I need your help," I said to the empty air. "I need to know how you knew which timelines mattered, how you filtered out the noise, please. If any part of you is still here, if you can hear me, help me understand." Silence. I sat there for an hour, hoping for something. A sign, a voice, a feeling, anything. Nothing came. I was about to leave when I noticed the logbooks. Decades of entries. Kavanaugh's handwriting documenting 40 years of observations. Maybe the answer was in there. Maybe he'd written down his methodology. I pulled out the most recent logbook. The entries ended on July 18th, the night he'd saved me. His final entry was dated that morning. July 18th, 1983. External date, 2024. Subjective experience, 41 years of observations. Today, I will make my final intervention. Emma Reeves has the gift, but lacks the wisdom. She sees all branches equally, doesn't understand that some timelines have more weight than others. The key to distinguishing high probability from low probability futures is emotional resonance. The timelines that matter, the ones that will manifest unless prevented, carry emotional weight. Fear, grief, loss. You can feel them pressing on you. The timelines that are merely possible feel lighter, less substantial, like shadows instead of solid objects. Trust your gut. The timelines that make you feel sick, that make your chest tight, that make you want to cry, those are the ones that will happen unless you intervene. The timelines that are just intellectually concerning but don't trigger visceral reactions, those are low probability branches. Document them, but don't mobilize resources for them. I learned this the hard way. Spent my first decade broadcasting every possible disaster. Caused hundreds of false alarms. Nearly got the program shut down. But then I understood. The timelines that hurt to see are the ones that need warning. Emma will learn this too. Give her time. Give her grace. She's carrying a burden no human should carry. But she's strong enough. She's already proven that by surviving what broke others. My final gift to her is time. I'll spend myself to give her more of it. More years to learn. More years to refine the broadcasts. More years to live. I'm ready to move on. Ready to rest. 41 years is enough. The duty passes to her now. May she carry it better than I did. Fair skies ahead. James Kavanaugh. I sat there with tears streaming down my face. He'd known I'd come here, known I'd need his guidance, and he'd left it for me in the one place I'd think to look. Emotional resonance. That was the key. The bad timelines that would actually manifest carried weight. Made me feel sick. The merely possible ones were lighter. I'd been treating all futures equally, giving the same weight to low probability branches as high probability ones. That's why I'd made the mistake with the A1 fire. It had been intellectually concerning, but hadn't carried the visceral dread of a real threat. I understood now, and I could do better. The rest of fire season was different. I recalibrated my broadcasts based on Kavanaugh's final lesson. I focused on the timelines that hurt to see, the ones that made my chest tight, the ones that carried emotional weight, and my accuracy improved. No more false alarms. No more mobilizations for fires that never manifested. Just reliable warnings about real threats. The district's trust in the broadcasts returned. People started calling me the new Tower 7, even though I was broadcasting from Tower 12. The legend continued, just with a new voice. Fire season ended in September. The last broadcast was September 30th, a simple forecast for October 1st. Clear skies, cool temperatures, no fire danger, fair skies ahead, just like Kavanaugh's final entry. Tom hiked up to Tower 12 on October 1st to help me pack out. You made it. Full season, and you made a difference. 37 fire ignitions predicted and prevented. 4 evacuations that saved lives. 0 false alarms after you recalibrated. That's better than Kavanaugh's first season. I had a good teacher. Even if he wasn't alive to teach me. Are you coming back next year? I looked out at the mountains. At the forest where I'd spent 4 months seeing every possible future. At the tower that had become my home. I don't know. Part of me wants to walk away, live a normal life, stop seeing timelines. But part of me knows the district needs someone who can do what Kavanaugh did, what I do now. And there's no one else. There could be. If you trained them. If you taught someone else how to see the timelines, how to distinguish high probability from low probability futures. You could mentor someone the way Kavanaugh mentored you through his logs. You think someone else could learn this? I think the gift chooses people who are already looking for it. People who are drawn to the work, to the isolation, to the responsibility. Next season, we could bring in a second lookout. Station them nearby. You could teach them. Transfer the knowledge before you decide whether to leave permanently. It was a good idea. A way to ensure the broadcast continued without binding myself to this mountain forever. Okay, next season I'll train someone, pass it on, and then we'll see if I can walk away or if I'm bound here like Kavanaugh was. I packed my gear and hiked down from Tower 12. The descent was bittersweet. I was leaving behind the most intense 4 months of my life. Leaving behind the overlays, the constant weight of watching futures branch and collapse. But I knew I'd be back. The duty had chosen me, and like Kavanaugh, I couldn't abandon it. It's been 3 years since that first season. I've returned every summer, spent 4 months in Tower 12 broadcasting warnings, preventing disasters, and I've trained others. 5 people now can see the timelines, can distinguish high probability from low probability futures, can provide the warnings the district needs. The broadcasts continue. Every night at 11:45 p.m. someone transmits. Sometimes it's me. Sometimes it's one of the people I've trained. But the warnings keep coming. The timelines keep being monitored. The bad futures keep being prevented. Tower 7 remains silent. Kavanaugh is gone, but his legacy lives on through those of us who carry the duty he started. I think about him often, about his final entry in the logbook, about his choice to spend himself to save 2 lives, about 41 years of isolated service in pursuit of preventing deaths he'd never witnessed because his warnings worked. That's the paradox of this work. Success means nothing happens. The fires you prevent never burn. The deaths you avoid never occur. You spend yourself watching bad timelines so others can live good ones. And no one knows what you prevented because prevention is invisible. But we know. Those of us who see the timelines, we know what we're stopping. We know the weight of the responsibility, and we carry it because someone has to. Because the forests will always burn. The lightning will always strike. The conditions will always align for catastrophe. But now we can see it coming, can warn people, can help them choose the better timeline. That's Kavanaugh's real gift. Not seeing the future, but giving people the information they need to change it. This is my warning to anyone who works in fire lookouts, in forest service, in any isolated job where you're alone with responsibility. If you start seeing things that shouldn't be possible, if you start perceiving multiple futures, if you feel the weight of preventable disasters pressing down on you, don't ignore it. Don't dismiss it as stress or isolation-induced hallucination. You might have the gift, the curse, the duty. And if you do, find us. Find the people who broadcast from the towers. Find the ones who monitor timelines. Find the community that carries this weight together. Because Kavanaugh spent 41 years alone, isolated, bearing the responsibility by himself until it killed him and bound him to his tower. But it doesn't have to be that way. We've learned from his sacrifice. We've built a network, a community of timeline watchers, people who support each other, who share the burden. The broadcasts continue. The warnings keep coming. The bad timelines keep being prevented. And Tower 7, though silent, remains standing. A reminder of the man who died trying to warn people, who stayed at his post even knowing the cost, who spent himself to save others. Sometimes, on quiet nights, I swear I can still hear him. A faint transmission on the old frequency, just 3 words, "Fair skies ahead." That's his legacy, his final broadcast, his promise that despite everything, despite the fires and the deaths and the endless weight of responsibility, there are good timelines. There are futures worth fighting for, there are lives worth saving, and someone will always be watching. Someone will always be warning. Someone will always be there to help you choose the better path. We are the new Tower 7. All of us. Everyone who sees the timelines and makes the broadcasts, and we'll keep watching, keep warning, keep preventing. Because that's what Kavanaugh would have wanted. That's what he died for. That's what he bound himself to a tower for 41 years to accomplish. Fair skies ahead, for all of us. If we're willing to do the work, if we're willing to carry the weight, if we're willing to watch the timelines and warn when the bad futures threaten. Someone's always watching, someone's always warning, and the broadcasts never end.